Hello everyone. In this video, we will discuss about some of the important curves in economics from your examination perspective. So we will start with Engel's curve. Engel's curve, it's a graphical representation of how income affects the demand for a good or a service. Like this curve discusses when the income of a person increases, how does it affect the demand for a good or a service? Let us take for example, a person A. His income level is increasing. So there is an increase in income. We know that with an increase in income, we have already learned that the quantity demanded would increase. So that's a natural phenomenon. When you have more money, you will spend more money. When you have more income, you will buy more commodities. This is very general, very common. So whenever there is a hike in or increase in income, the demand for goods and services increases. But Engel's curve is particularly concerned about how an increase in income is going to affect the expenditure on food. That is, how do a person react or how do a person's demand for food increases or decreases with an increase in income. So to put it simply, Engel's law says that whenever the income of a person increases, the spending on food becomes a smaller share of income. This statement can be quite confusing, but to make it clear, we will take an illustration. Okay, assume that a person A, let us consider a person A. You can even imagine yourself as this person A. Assume that in the first case, this person was earning 15,000 rupees per month. This is our assumption. Okay. Now, out of this 15,000, this person used to spend maybe, for example, 30% on food commodities, which is 4,500 rupees. So this is the case. Okay, this is the first case. A person A earning 15,000 per month and spending 30% on food, that is 4,500 rupees. Assume that the income of person A increased from 15,000 rupees to 1 lakh rupees. Okay, so his income has increased from 15,000 to 1 lakh. Now, assume that when he earns an income of 1 lakh, assume this person is spending some maybe at the maximum 15,000 rupees on food. Okay, assume that he's spending 15,000 rupees on food. Now see, 15,000 is 15% of his income. Earlier, when he was spending 4,500 rupees, it was 30% of his income. Now, even though he has, more than tripled the expenditure on food, it is only 15%, which means that how much ever the income of a person increases, the percentage share of expenditure on food will decrease only. Why? Because a person cannot spend more than a particular limit on food. And especially when the income increases, the percentage of money spent on food reduces. So that is simply Engel's law. Graph is not important. This is basically graphical representation of this would be Engel's curve. Just remember the law. Now, next is Kuznets curve. Kuznets curve, it shows the hypothesis that economic growth initially leads to inequality and later the inequality reduces. This is very important. The practical application of Kuznets curve is very important for our examination. I'll illustrate the practical application. I'll also illustrate what is this Kuznets curve. So let's take it as I said, according to Kuznets curve, whenever there is economic growth, okay, whenever a country or an economy achieves economic growth, inequality will be high. So inequality would be high. Let us take the example of 1991 reforms. We know that after 91 reforms, Indian economy has increased its GDP, or there was an increased GDP growth rate in Indian economy, or the growth rate of the country was high. Okay, but this eventually led to increase in inequalities. Why? Because whenever a country or an economy achieves higher rates of economic growth or development, it comes with certain inequalities, or inequalities comes as its consequence. Why? Because when there is growth or development, certain sectors would be affected badly. For example, with the 1991 reforms, we adopted liberalization, privatization, and globalization. As a result of globalization, what happened? As a result of globalization, many MNCs came to India and they were able to provide commodities at a competitive price, at very less price, because the MNCs enjoyed something called as economies of scale. So this was a scenario. So after the reforms, many MNCs stepped into Indian economy and these MNCs were able to provide the commodities at a lower price. As a result of this, the consumers started buying foreign commodities and this affected the domestic commodities badly. So as a result of this, what happened? Many of the MSMEs, micro, small and medium enterprises and also cottage industries in India shut down. This led to serious inequalities. And one of the drawbacks of globalization, as we discussed, would be increase in inequalities. This is natural in any country or any economy, according to Kusnat. So Kusnat says that when there is economic growth or development in an economy, inequality comes along with it. But this inequalities does not stay for long. After some point, there is a break-even point, and after this point, the inequalities tends to reduce. Why? Because let us take the 91 reforms example itself to understand this. 1991 reforms led to liberalization, privatization, and globalization, which led to economic growth. Economic growth increased. But another result of these reforms was that inequalities increased. Why? As we said, many of them lost jobs because of technological intervention. Also, many businesses, especially small scale businesses in India, were shut down because of large competition from global players. All these were there. But after some point, how does this inequalities reduce? These inequalities reduce because these MNCs are able to create a lot number of jobs. They bring a lot of development and growth into the country. So this will further create employment opportunities, further growth. This growth will convert into further opportunities. So this opportunities will reduce the inequalities. Better education, better skill development, better employment opportunities. This will eventually reduce the inequalities. So the basic idea behind Kuznets curve is that any development or any growth in an economy, especially a drastic growth in the economy, comes along with inequalities. Okay, it comes along with inequalities, but the inequalities doesn't last for a long time. These inequalities would be narrowed down in the upcoming phase, or in the long run, these inequalities would narrow down. This is what Kuznets talks about, and that is what is Kuznets curve all about. This is the graphical representation of this idea. Okay, so we will read it once. Kuznets curve is used to demonstrate the hypothesis that economic growth initially leads to greater inequality, but later the inequality reduces. And this is proposed by the American economist Simon Kuznets. And with that, this is called as Kuznets curve. Okay. As economic growth comes from creation of better products, it usually boosts the income of workers and investors who participate in the first wave of innovation. This inequality, however, tends to be temporary as workers and investors who were initially left behind soon catch up by helping offer either the same or better products. This improves their income. This is by creating more jobs and all that. See the graphical representation. On the x-axis, we have per capita income, and the y-axis, we have the income inequality. Developing economies, inequalities are high. See here, the inequalities are high till this point. But at this point, this is the turning point. So here, the inequalities reduces. See, when the inequalities are increasing, the country is still a developing country. But at a point, it becomes a developed country and then the inequalities reduce. This is what will happen to any economy according to Kuznets. Okay. Then another version of this Kuznets curve is environmental Kuznets curve. It suggests that economic development initially leads to deterioration of the environment. In the first one, we have seen that economic growth leads to inequalities. Instead of inequalities, here the curve discusses about environmental deterioration. That is, at the phase or the initial phases of development, environment would be compromised, or the concept of sustainability and ecological balance would be compromised in the initial phases, but after certain level of economic growth, the society will slowly start to improve its relationship with the environment, and therefore the degradation reduces. This is environmental Kuznets curve. Initially, if you take any example, any developed country has contributed so negatively to environmental degradation. But after some point, they do understand the importance of sustainability and conserving environment, and therefore the inequality, or sorry, the attitude towards the environment progresses naturally. So this is the environmental Kuznets curve. See here, in the pre-industrial economies, it was high, deterioration was high, but later it reduces. Okay, so that is environmental Kuznets curve. Next, we have the Laffer curve. All these curves will have practical applications in the upcoming modules, and that's why take it very seriously. Okay, Laffer curve. It states that if tax rates are increased above a certain level, then tax revenues can actually fall. Okay, let's talk about tax rates. Tax rates. Now, according to Laffer curve, what does Laffer curve say? Laffer curve says that if the tax rates are high, if the tax rates are kept high, so what is the intention behind increased tax rates? When a government increases its tax rates, the government believes to get more revenue. The purpose of increasing tax rates is to collect more revenue. But according to this curve, when the tax rates are kept high, tax revenue will gradually fall. Why? Because when the tax rates are very high, people will have a tendency to escape from taxes or tax net, which we call as tax evasion. So the idea is that at high rates of tax, that is, when the tax rates are kept high, there is a tendency of tax evasion. That is, there is a tendency that people will escape from the taxes. So there would be chances of tax evasion. And as a result of tax evasion, tax revenue would fall. So this is what Laffer curve says. Again, what is the other side of it? When the tax rates are kept very less, what will happen? Again, the tax revenue would be less because the rates are very less. And government cannot actually increase the tax rates above a particular threshold because it will further lead to a reduction in the tax revenue. Why? This will lead to tax evasion. So what does Laffer curve ideally propose? Laffer curve ideally proposes that tax rates should be kept at a moderate level, or tax rates should be kept balanced. It should not be too high or it should not be too less. It should be moderate rate of tax so that the government can maximize tax revenue. And according to the Laffer curve, the conclusion that we can take, or the recommendation that the government can take, is tax revenue would be the highest or maximum when the tax rates are kept at optimal levels. That is, not too high or not too less. This is what the curve says, Laffer curve says. So we will have a practical application of this Laffer curve when we discuss about government budgeting and taxation policies of the government. So this is very important. We will apply this concept there. We will discuss about progressive taxation. We will discuss about regressive taxation and all that. Then we will understand why it's important to understand this concept. Okay, I hope it's clear. So what is Laffer curve? According to the curve, tax rates increased above a certain level will lead to a reduction or fall in the revenue. Okay, so it shows the relationship between tax rates and tax revenue collected. So it shows, what does it show? Relationship between the rates of taxes collected and the rate at which tax is collected and the tax revenue collected. Now, Laffer curve states that cutting taxes could in theory lead to higher tax revenues. But even when cutting taxes leads to higher tax revenue, it should not go beyond a particular level down also. Why? Because that again will again, reduce the revenue. So it should be kept at an optimal rate. Now, this is the Laffer curve. This is how it looks like. On the y-axis, we have tax revenue, and x-axis, we have tax rate. Now, see, region of increasing revenue and revenue maximizing point. And after this, when the tax rate increases, see, there will be a decline in the tax revenue. This is largely due to tax evasion. All right. So this is Laffer curve. Next, we have Phillips curve. Phillips curve. This, I'm sure Phillips curve is very popular and, more common among the aspirants than any other curve, like maybe compared to Laffer and Kuznets curve. Phillips curve is even more common. So Phillips curve is the curve which defines the relationship between inflation and unemployment rates. It shows how inflation and unemployment are connected to each other. So according to Phillips curve, there is a negative or an inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment. So what does it mean? It means that when the rates of inflation increases, when inflation increases, unemployment reduces, and when inflation reduces, unemployment increases. So this is what Phillips curve says. So there is an inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment. Before we go into the graph, I want to tell you or explain to you how does this happen. So there are some drawbacks also for this Phillips curve. We will see that also. See, first thing is, as the rate of inflation increases, what happens is there is increased money supply. All right. So as the rate of inflation increases, the money supply in the economy increases. As money supply increases, aggregate demand in the economy increases. So when the demand in the economy increases, the production increases. And production increases means GDP increases. And in order to sustain or help the production process, there is a need of labor. Okay, labor demand will go up. As the labor demand goes up, more employment is created. Therefore, unemployment rate reduces. This is how Phillips curve draws the negative relationship between inflation and unemployment. When inflation increases, unemployment reduces. I'll explain it one more time. When there is high rates of inflation, money supply would be high. When money supply is high, aggregate demand would be high. When the demand is high, production increases. And as a result, GDP would increase. But in order to produce more, we need more labor. So what will happen? More employment opportunities will be created and therefore unemployment reduces. This is what Phillips curve talks about. Now we'll see the Phillips curve. See, Phillips curve. Here we have the rate of inflation and here we have unemployment rate. See, when inflation is increasing at higher rates of inflation, unemployment reduces. Further high means unemployment further reduces. So at higher rates of inflation, unemployment reduces according to Phillips curve. But we need to understand the negative aspect of it as well. I'm not sure whether you know the concept of different types of inflation like the demand pull and the cost push inflation. I will be taking inflation in the upcoming module. So if you don't know about demand pull and cost push inflation, you can just leave this area here. We will be discussing this again there. Okay. Yeah, but I'll explain it for those who already know what is demand pull and cost push inflation. See, here Phillips curve talks about only demand pull inflation. Why? Because it is only in the case of demand pull inflation that the money supply increases. But in case of cost push inflation, money supply doesn't increase. It is the cost of production which increases. Okay. So first drawback is that this can be applied only in case of a demand pull inflation. Now the second thing is, we said that as the demand increases, production will increase. But the problem with production is that there is a maximum capacity to produce. That is, the resources are limited. Therefore, you cannot produce beyond a particular level or beyond a particular capacity. There is a maximum capacity. Now, let us take, for example, the demand in the economy is equal to 200 units. But the maximum production capacity of the economy is only 150 units. That is, when you employ all the resources in the economy, you are only able to produce 150 and the demand is 200. So what will we do in that case? The price will further increase, which will lead to hyperinflation. So we cannot universally say that whenever there is an increase in inflation, the employment increases or unemployment reduces. There is a particular level till which unemployment will reduce, but beyond a particular level, inflation will affect the economy negatively. So Phillips curve has not explained about this beyond level, or explained about this particular point beyond which inflation is not good, or has not spoken about moderate rate of inflation, and also has not mentioned that this is only applicable in case of a demand pull inflation. But we will be discussing this in detail. If you haven't understood this, it's okay. We will be discussing this in detail, but I'll be taking all the modules only in the paid course. On YouTube, you will get only limited number of classes. You can always enroll for the module class. Okay, so yeah. So that's it about the Phillips curve. Okay, then last we have the Lorentz curve. Lorentz curve is used to measure inequality, okay, income inequality. So it's a graphical representation of proportion of income earned by any given percentage of population and the inequality distribution. So I'll explain this curve. Okay, this red one is the Lorentz curve, and the straight line, the black one, it is the line of inequality. So this is the line of inequality and this is the Lorentz curve. Okay, the distribution of income in an economy is represented by Lorentz curve, which means the red line represents the distribution of income in an economy. And this line of equality, it is a straight line. Now see, you can see here that there is a gap between the line of equality and Lorentz curve. So this gap is the inequality. Okay, inequality. I hope you understood. Now, for example, if the Lorentz curve touches the line of equality, which means that there is no inequality in the economy. Okay, that is what Lorentz curve talks about. We have one more topic to finish in this particular module, that is resource allocation, which we'll be doing in the next video. So that's it regarding different types of important curves. I hope this is clear for you and this has helped you in your preparation. Thank you so much. If you want to avail the entire course, you can join my module class. I'll be explaining the entire basic economy and development there. It is a comprehensive module. You can enroll for the courses. Thank you so much.